AITA for walking away when she used intimacy to control every part of me. It started over something stupid. One of those arguments where you can't even remember the details. A few days later I asked her if we could plan some time together this weekend. Just the two of us. No errands, no distractions, just a walk, maybe dinner, maybe something more. Something to remind me we were still married. Not just living under the same roof like two strangers splitting the bills. She didn't even look up from her phone. "You'll get intimacy when I feel like it," she said, her voice flat with a hint of mockery. Then she looked up, smirked, and went back to scrolling. For a second I just stood there, feeling my ears burn. I didn't yell. I didn't sigh. I didn't even ask her what the hell that was supposed to mean. I just smiled, turned around, and walked away. That smile wasn't sarcastic. It wasn't angry. It was cold, sudden clarity. Because in that moment, I saw it all for what it really was. Not just this fight. Not even just this marriage. I saw the pattern. How long I'd been dancing to a song she'd stopped playing years ago. And how ridiculous I must have looked trying to make something work that she'd already silently quit. She didn't follow me. Not physically. But I felt her watching me go. And I think even then, some small part of her realized something had shifted. She thought she'd won. But I wasn't retreating. I was exiting. That night I lay in bed beside her. Both of us facing away from each other. I could hear the soft tap-tap-tapping of her phone screen as she scrolled. My side of the bed felt like the edge of a cliff, and the air between us was too cold to cross. I didn't try. I just stared at the ceiling with my eyes open. My mind racing, not with panic, but with purpose. I thought about how we got here. 5 years ago, she was warm, soft-spoken, affectionate. She laughed at my stupid jokes and held me after long days. Our closeness wasn't just physical. It was that quiet, reassuring presence we had in each other's lives. We had something real, or so I thought. But then came the slow changes. Little things at first. Less physical touch. More nights where she was too tired. Fewer shared laughs. More distractions. I'd ask about her day and get one-word answers. I told myself it was stress. Work. Hormones. Phases. Anything but what it really was. She'd stay up late watching shows I didn't even know she liked. Her back to me on the couch. When I tried to talk to her about it, just to gently check in, she'd roll her eyes and say I was being too sensitive. Or worse, accuse me of being needy. So I backed off. I focused on work. Doubled down on being the responsible one. The bill payer. The errand runner. The husband who never complained. But all I got in return was more distance. More silence. More coldness. I didn't tell anyone how bad things had gotten. Not my brother. Not my coworkers. Not even my best friend who I used to share everything with. Part of me was embarrassed. Part of me still believed that if I just gave her space, she'd come back. That the woman I married was still in there somewhere, buried under stress or sadness or whatever excuse I kept telling myself. But tonight, she ended all that. It was the way she said it. Not just the words, but the delivery. Matter of fact. Like it was a privilege I hadn't earned. Like she held the power and I should be grateful for the crumbs. "You'll get intimacy when I feel like it." She'd finally said out loud what she'd been acting out for years. And now, finally, I heard her. So I stopped fighting for something that was already gone. No anger. No pleading. No more trying to bridge a gap that would never be filled. Just a smile. A walk down the hall in silence. But this silence was mine. And soon, everything else would be too. Because she didn't know it yet, but I just started packing. Silently, piece by piece, the life I was taking with me. The first thing I did was stop trying. Not in the dramatic, storming out, "we need to talk" kind of way. No, I mean the quiet kind. The kind she wouldn't notice right away. The kind that creeps in slowly, like a breeze through a crack in the window. Chilling, but almost imperceptible. I didn't reach for her hand on the couch anymore. I didn't ask if she wanted coffee in the morning. I didn't call her during the day with little check-ins or gifts like I used to when I still believed I could fix this with kindness. And the strangest thing? She didn't say a word. Maybe at first she liked it. Maybe she thought she'd finally trained me out of needing affection. Maybe she thought this was what control looked like, having someone orbit you until they finally stop spinning on their own. But what she didn't realize is that when someone stops spinning, they don't stay put. They drift away. And I was drifting fast. I started getting up before her, earlier than I needed to. Not because I had somewhere urgent to be, but because I couldn't stand the silent tension of our mornings anymore. The way she'd come into the kitchen and not say a word. The way her eyes would pass over me like I was the wallpaper. So I'd leave before I had to see her. I'd sit in my car with a coffee and just breathe. It felt like the first real breath I'd taken in months. I started going to the gym again, not because I was looking for a revenge body, but because I needed something to pour my energy into that wasn't this empty house. I'd forgotten how good it felt to feel strong. To sweat. To push myself in ways that had nothing to do with being a husband or a provider. And yeah, I started noticing the looks again. From women. From people who saw me. People who didn't look at me like I was just an appliance humming in the background of their lives. But I wasn't stupid. I wasn't doing any of this to cheat on her or to get even. I wasn't her. This wasn't about finding someone new. It was about finding myself again. One night, about a week after that fight, she noticed the shift. I'd just gotten back from the gym, not rushing home anymore. So I walked in around 8. Dinner was already over, takeout again, by the look of the containers left on the counter. She was in her robe, sitting on the couch watching something on Netflix, half a glass of wine on the table beside her. "You're late," she said without looking at me. "Didn't realize there was a curfew," I replied, setting down my keys. That got her attention. Her eyes snapped up like she couldn't believe I'd said that. She watched me move around the kitchen, cleaning up her mess without a word. No sighs. No complaints. Just quiet detachment. "Are you okay?" she asked, more curious than concerned. "Better than I've been in a long time." That answer seemed to throw her a little. She stared at me like she was trying to figure out what had changed, but she didn't ask anything else. And I didn't offer. The next few days followed the same pattern. I was polite, courteous, even helpful, but I stopped being hers. I didn't initiate physical contact. I didn't ask questions. I didn't show jealousy. Not even interest. And that silence started to get to her. She started testing me in little ways. Wearing lingerie to bed when she normally wore old t-shirts. Suddenly taking an interest in asking how my day was. But I didn't bite. I was polite, respectful. But she wasn't the center of my world anymore. She wasn't even in the top 5. Then came the financial shift. I'd always been the one keeping us afloat. Bills, savings, investments, taxes. She never had to think about it. She called herself independent, but she never actually sat down and looked at a credit card statement unless it was to question a charge I'd made for something I needed. So I made some subtle adjustments. Canceled a few subscriptions. One she didn't know I was paying for. Redirected a portion of my paycheck into a private account she didn't have access to. I started budgeting. Planning for a future that didn't involve joint assets. A future without her. She didn't notice right away. But she would. Oh, she would. Especially when the power she thought she had started to slip through her perfectly manicured fingers. Because it wasn't about intimacy. It was never about intimacy. It was about control. And I just stopped playing her game. It was the way she started watching me that gave her away. Not in a loving, rediscovering her husband kind of way. No, this was different. Calculated. Suspicious. Like she knew something was slipping away but couldn't figure out where the leak was. I'd walk into a room and feel her eyes following me from behind her phone. She'd ask casual questions. "Who were you texting?" Or, "Why so dressed up for the gym?" But the smile didn't reach her eyes. She thought I was cheating. The irony almost made me laugh. I wasn't cheating. I wasn't even flirting. I was simply coming back to life. And she didn't know how to handle that. Because in her mind, I was the steady one. The rock. The dependable husband who never strayed, never questioned, never threatened her position at the center of our little world. So when I stopped orbiting, she panicked. That's when I knew she had something to hide. The first crack came from a friend of hers, a woman named Rachel. Single, loud kind of friend my wife used to keep at arm's length. Until recently. I ran into her at the grocery store. She saw me in the wine aisle and did a double take. "Oh hi," she said, surprised. "Didn't expect to see you here." "Why not?" I asked. She opened her mouth like she was about to say something, then closed it just as quickly. "No reason. Just thought you'd be working or whatever." I didn't push it, but I saw it. That flicker of recognition. That tiny glint in her eyes when someone realizes they've said too much. I played it cool, but that moment stuck with me. That night I checked my wife's calendar. The one we both shared on our phones for years, mostly to coordinate schedules. Lately it had been full of vague entries, wellness consult, creative thing, creative meeting. Nothing unusual if you didn't know her. But I did. And she wasn't creative. She wasn't consulting. She wasn't launching any kind of business. I asked her casually once and she just shrugged. "Personal projects," she said. "You wouldn't be interested." She was right. I wasn't. But now I was. So I did something I'd never done before. Not in all the years of our marriage. I checked her phone. Not sneakily. Not with panic. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't hesitate. She was asleep. I picked it up, used her fingerprint, and scrolled. The usual texts to friends were there, but so were the deleted ones. The gaps. The silences between messages. Until I found the folder she'd hidden, an app behind a fake calculator icon. One of those things teenagers use when they're trying to outsmart their parents. I opened it, and there it was, the second phone number. The real one. The one she'd been using for him. No name, just a string of digits. But the messages told the story themselves. "Can't stop thinking about yesterday. He hasn't touched me in weeks. It's like living with a shadow. No, He doesn't suspect. He's too passive. I stared at that word for a long time. Passive. That's what I was to her. The man who provided everything. Who built our life from scratch. Who absorbed every slight, every coldness, every dismissive laugh for years without breaking. She thought that made me weak. I kept reading the messages. They were flirtatious, some explicit, some downright cruel. But one stuck with me more than the others. He just exists, that's all. Pays the bills and fades away. It's boring. It wasn't just an affair. It was contempt. She didn't just cheat on me, she despised me for making it too easy. That night, I sat on the back patio long after the sun had set, letting the cold air bite at my skin just to remind myself I could still feel something. And I made a decision. This wouldn't be a confrontation. No yelling. No begging her to explain. I wasn't interested in closure. I already had all the answers I needed. This was going to be surgical. Precise. I'd cut her out of my life so cleanly and quietly she wouldn't even realize she was bleeding until I was already gone. But I still needed to know one thing. Who? Because if I was going to dismantle her little fantasy world, I wanted to know exactly what foundation she'd build it on. So I ran the number through a contact lookup service. And when the name popped up, everything around me stopped. I knew him. Of course I knew him. We worked in the same building. He was the one she always called harmless, the goofy guy from the IT department who reminded her of a golden retriever. Married. 2 kids. I'd had beers with him once. He'd fixed her laptop when it crashed during tax season. She'd baked him cookies for it. And yes, he was sending her pictures of himself in the shower while I was setting up autopay for our mortgage and vacuuming the living room. That was the moment the last piece clicked into place. She never had power over me. She simply used my silence as a mirror, one that showed her what she was afraid of becoming. And now that I'd stopped reflecting her image, she was falling apart. But I wasn't going to stop there. I was going to take this all the way. There's a specific kind of silence that comes before a storm. Not loud, not sudden, just still. Heavy, like the world is holding its breath. That was the silence between us now. She didn't know I'd read the messages, that I knew everything. But she sensed something. The ground was shifting beneath her feet. And as much as she tried to act normal, she couldn't hide the way her eyes kept flicking to me at dinner. The way her words stumbled when I didn't respond the way I used to. I'd become a stranger in my own home, and she was terrified of him, because that stranger didn't need her. She tried to flirt one night. Put on that black nightgown I'd once bought her for our anniversary. 3 years ago, I think. Stood in the doorway of our bedroom like a twisted ghost of the past, trying to summon a version of us that no longer existed. I didn't even look up from my book. I'm tired, I said, turning the page. Long day. The flash in her eyes then, that quick, hot flicker of rejection, was the first real emotion I'd seen from her in weeks. She hated it. Hated feeling powerless. But that was the difference between us now. She was playing checkers. I was playing chess. And I'd already made my move. I'd spoken to a lawyer, quietly and efficiently. We went over the texts, the app, the screenshots I collected. Adultery wasn't an automatic win in our state, but when coupled with financial deception, with hidden purchases, private accounts, and proof of infidelity, it was leverage. And I had plenty. I also had timing. I waited until the morning of her wellness retreat. A whole weekend that was supposedly about self-care and mindfulness, according to her. In reality, she was meeting him at a cabin about 3 hours away. I knew because I'd watched them book it together from her hidden email account. The one she conveniently forgot was still linked to our shared tablet. She thought I'd be working all weekend. I let her think that. I watched her pack, kissed her on the cheek, wished her a relaxing trip. And once she was gone, I put the rest of the plan in motion. The joint bank account? Frozen and separated. The joint credit card? Cancelled. The lease on her luxury car? Terminated. She hadn't realized it was in my name the whole time. By the time she got to that cabin, her phone would be lighting up with declined payments, notifications, cancellations. Confusion would turn to panic, then to despair. I didn't go there. I didn't need to. I didn't want some dramatic confrontation in the woods. I wanted her to sit in that cabin with the man she destroyed our marriage for and feel everything unravel. To realize he wasn't going to save her. That she wasn't running towards something, just running. That night, I sent her a text. Just one. When you come back, don't come home. Papers will be served Monday. No punctuation. No anger. Just the truth. I didn't block her. I wanted her to respond, to try and claw back what she thought she still owned. She didn't disappoint. Wait, what are you talking about? We need to talk. This is crazy. You're overreacting. Really, are you doing this? You're going to throw everything away. And finally, the one that made me exhale. Not laugh, not cry, just exhale. You're being so dramatic. You're not the kind of man who just leaves like this. That was it. That was the last thread she clung to. This fantasy version of me she'd built in her mind. Quiet. Dependable. Emotionally pliable. Her emotional sponge. She thought she knew me. But she only knew the version of me who tolerated her. And that man was gone. I didn't respond. I slept better that night than I had in years. She came back Sunday night even though I told her not to. Tried her keys. I'd already changed the locks. I didn't go to the door, just watched from the side window as she stood there under the porch light. Tired. Disheveled. And for the first time in years, unsure. She called, then knocked, then yelled my name. I stayed silent. Finally, she slid against the door, her voice breaking into a sob. She left that morning, leaving nothing on the porch but her pride, a broken heel, and the faintest smudge of mascara on the edge of our door frame. I saw the security footage later, just to confirm. She sat there for almost an hour, alternating between crying, texting, and what looked like negotiating with the night sky. Then she got up, composed herself like nothing had happened, and walked back to her car. Typical. The papers were served Monday, just as promised. Served at her office, in front of people she used to love impressing. I wasn't trying to humiliate her. I simply wasn't protecting her image anymore. That was a husband's job. And I'd resigned. The silence that followed was louder than any fight we'd ever had. At first, nothing. No texts, no emails. Just that unsettling calm that comes after a wildfire. Everything burned and still smoldering. But for a while, it's quiet. I went to work. To the gym. Talked. Ate. Laughed. Lived. Then came the drip feed. I made mistakes. We can talk. You're still my husband. Don't do this out of anger. You're not thinking clearly. She still didn't get it. This wasn't about anger. It wasn't even about the affair. It was about freedom, from the control, the manipulation, the gaslighting, the slow erosion of respect and intimacy disguised as normal marriage fatigue. She'd taken it all for granted because I never pushed back. And when I finally did, she thought I'd break. That I'd come running back. That I'd want closure or answers or apologies. But I didn't need closure. I'd already closed the door. What I wanted was peace. And I had it. She finally stopped texting. A mutual friend told me she'd moved into a one-bedroom apartment near her sister's, that she was driving a rental car, and that she'd started seeing a therapist. He also said the guy, her harmless golden retriever affair partner, was no longer in the picture. Apparently, when the financial tap got turned off and the reality of consequences set in, he wasn't so charming. Too bad. I didn't lose everything. I didn't scorch the earth. I didn't keep the house or leave her penniless. I simply took back what was mine. My time. My energy, my loyalty, my silence. And that, it turned out, was more valuable than she ever understood. The last time I saw her was 3 weeks after the papers were signed. I was buying a coffee, and she walked in, wearing sunglasses, no makeup, her hair pulled back in a way I'd never seen before. Simpler. More real. She froze when she saw me. I nodded politely and turned back to the counter. As I picked up my order, she stepped forward. "You look good," she said hesitantly. I smiled. Not cruelly. Just calmly. "I feel good." She stared at me like she was searching for something familiar. A crack. A softness. A version of me she could still reach. It wasn't there. I turned to leave. But before I did, I said one thing. "You once said I'd get intimacy when you felt like it." She opened her mouth, maybe to defend herself, maybe to apologize. I didn't wait to hear it. I walked out into the sun, took a sip of my coffee, and left her standing there, watching me walk away. Watching everything she used to control disappear. Because the truth is, she never had power. She just had permission. And finally, I took it back.